आमनु व अमिलुस्सालिहात व तवासौ बिल हक़ व तवासौ बिस सब्र। बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। शुरू आज का सेशन शुरू करते हैं। मोहम्मद ताहा फारूक।
My name is Dr. Mohammad Taha Farooq. I'm a PGR in ophthalmology department in Gulab Devi Hospital. Today, the case I'm going to present is of a patient named XYZ, 11 years of age, gender male, a resident of Lahore, and a student by occupation. He presented to us in OPD with complaints of a growth in left eye since childhood and irritation and watering on and off for last 6 months. On further taking the history of this presenting illness, the growth was located on the supratemporal orbital quadrant in the left eye. It was painless and gradually increasing from the past 1 year. There was no history of trauma to the eye, and it was associated with irritation and watering, and there was no itching and no discharge in the eye present, and his right eye was normal. This is the picture of the patient. As we can see over here, there's the growth present in the left eye in the supraorbital quadrant. His birth history was uneventful. He had a home birth. On immunization history, his EPS schedule was complete, and he was on mother feed when he was young. There was no significant past surgical or medical history of the patient. He had 2 brothers and 2 sisters and belonged to a lower middle socioeconomic status. On general physical examination of the patient, he was sitting comfortably, well oriented in time and place. His gastrointestinal examination was normal. CNS examination was also unremarkable, and cardiovascular system showed normal heart sounds, and the respiratory system was normal as well. Now moving towards the ocular examination of the patient, he was 6'6" in both eyes. The eyelids in both eyes were clear. The cornea of both eyes, right and left, was clear also. The pupils were round, reactive, and regular in both eyes. The anterior chamber was quiet and deep in right and left eye. The lens were also clear in both eyes. And the extraocular muscle movements were full in all gazes in his right and left eye. Intraocular pressure in the right eye was 14 and 13 in the left, and the fundus examination was normal bilaterally. On further examination of the lesion in the left eye, it was a subconjunctival growth on supratemporal area under the upper eyelid 7 millimeters from the limbus. There was mild conjunctival congestion. The growth appeared to be smooth and free from the upper eyelid, and his right eye was normal. On the basis of history and examination so far, we came up with the differential diagnosis that it might be dermolipoma, herniated orbital fat, lacrimal gland cyst, lacrimal gland prolapse, and conjunctival lymphoma. Further investigations were done, which were the B scan of the left eye and CT scan of the orbit with brain. B scan showed fat isogenic mass, dermolipoma, which was settling on the supratemporal part of the sclera. The sclera was normal on topographs, and the retrobulbar spaces with extraocular muscles were also normal, and there was no sign of inflammation. Up till here, on the basis of history, examination, and the B scan, we were pretty sure that it was dermolipoma. This is the B scan. Now moving on to CT scan, this is where the first twist in the tail came. When the CT scan report came, it showed left extraocular foreign body, which was metallic in nature, at uvuscleral layer at temporal side causing inflammatory reaction. This was the CT scan report. Now on the basis of CT scan, our definitive diagnosis became that it was left subconjunctival foreign body. Moving on to the treatment, medical treatment which was prescribed to the patient was a combination of antibiotic and steroid ointment along with artificial tears to reduce the irritation and watering the patient had been suffering from. Moving on towards a more definitive surgical treatment, exploration under general anesthesia was planned 2 weeks after the medical intervention. On the exploration under general anesthesia, under aseptic measures, exploration of the left conjunctival sac was performed, the granulation tissue was excised, the foreign body was recovered and sent for histopathology. The wound was sealed with continuous sutures. This is the video of the exploration under general anesthesia. After placing the anchor suture, the conjunctival sac is being dissected to view the underlying granulation tissue. Then the cautery was used to minimize the bleeding. Over here we can see the granulation tissue has been identified and is now being dissected out using blunt and sharp dissection. Here we can see that the granulation tissue has almost been removed from the conjunctival sac. Now after removing the excised granulation tissue, the conjunctival sac is being closed with Vicryl 6-0 and continuous sutures. Now another twist in the tail came over here when we saw the foreign body which was released from the granulation tissue, that it did not appear to be metallic in nature, but either seemed a piece of a tooth or a piece of a bone or something plastic in nature. Both specimens were sent to histopathology separately. Next day on the first post-op visit, the patient showed conjunctival congestion. In the left eye, there was no deposition or growth in conjunctiva, and the sutures were in place and the extraocular muscle movements of the left eye were full. Yet another twist in the tail came when the histopathology report came that the foreign body was plastic in nature, measuring 5 millimeters by 4 millimeters and 1 millimeter, and the granulation tissue which was encapsulating it was fibro-fatty tissue with mild lymphocytic infiltration. On inquiring further with the histopathologist, they told us how they identified the foreign body. What they do is that they put the foreign body in 5% diluted solution of nitric acid, and if the foreign body is containing some sort of calcium depositions, it dissolves in the nitric acid. So even after putting the foreign body in the nitric acid for more than 2 to 3 hours, it was still not dissolved, ruling out that it could have been some piece of a bone or some piece of tooth. So they reached to the conclusion that it was a plastic foreign body. This is the histopathology report. The take-home message from this case is that we should not just rely on the history and examination of the patient, because as we can see in this case that even after asking repeatedly from the mother and the father of the patient that whether there was any foreign body trauma history to the eye, they did not give us any history of foreign body trauma. So we should also take help from the all available investigative procedures and techniques for confirming our diagnosis, because sometimes a seemingly obvious disease can be something else entirely. Thank you all for your patient listening. Do you have any questions? Yes, please.
First, the comment that you haven't used the template that was given for the presentations in this ophthalmological psychopath. Number one. Number two is that you did some kind of chemical test to find out the calcification. Aren't there any other tests which can show calcification?
We didn't perform any chemical test. The foreign body was sent to the histopathology lab. They put it in the nitric acid solution and they came up with the conclusion. It's their test, they perform it. We sent it to the histopathology lab.
Any test that you can do to confirm whether there is calcification or not?
And the foreign body received.
In any issue of the eye.
यार उनको माइक दे दो भाई.
Ma'am, I'm not sure about that we can perform. We just sent it to the histopathology lab.
What about B-scan? How will you see calcification in the B-scan?
It will be hypodense on the B scan. Hyperdense, hyper. But over here it showed dermolipoma on the B scan. That was the reason we were confused.
Okay, thank you.
जी. From whom did you take the history of? From patient himself? His
No.
relatives,
The patient was
parents?
11 years old. We asked the patient as well, but we did not rely on the patient's history only. We asked the mother and the father, and also her aunt was present. All the family members which were present over there, we asked them again and again. Was there any, especially after the foreign body report came, the CT scan, we asked the patients and the attendants again and again, was there any history? Maybe when he was younger, maybe there would have been any foreign body trauma, but they gave no any history.
Did you show them the foreign
Yes,
body?
we showed them the foreign body before sending it to histopathology.
Did
They
you
were
think-
quite surprised as well.
Okay. Did you think of hydrated cyst in this case about?
No, sir,
Really?
because it wasn't showing that hydrated cyst presentation on the examination.
Did you do any test to rule out hydrated cyst?
No, sir.
You know any test? Do you know any test to rule out hydrated cyst?
No, actually, after the B scan report came, we ruled out hydrated cyst and did not
Okay,
look towards
but
it.
there is a test called Cassoni test. That is very important because hydrated cyst is not so uncommon in our part, especially child कहाँ से आया था?
Lahore se.
लाहौर से anyway, जहाँ से भी है, लेकिन hydrated cyst जो है ना, वो ऑर्बिट से काफ़ी सारा हमारा है इस पे रहता है.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next presenter is Nurul Ain.
टाइम पूरा था.
She is from Mughal Eye Hospital.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and Assalamu alaikum. My name is Dr. Nurul Ain, and I am a postgraduate resident of Mughal Eye Hospital. The topic that I am going to present today reminded me of a medical joke that I heard when I was in medical school. So I thought, why shouldn't I share it with you all? So once there was this doctor who operated upon a patient, and in the post-op recovery room, he went to his patient and said, "Simon, we have a good news and a bad news for you." The patient asked, "What is the bad news, doctor?" To which the doctor said, "Oh my God, we operated upon your wrong leg." The patient said, "Oh my God, what did you do?" "Anyways, what is the good news?" To which the doctor said, "Your diseased leg is getting better on its own." And with this, I start my presentation. The topic that I am going to present today is anti-VEGF a holy grail for every problem? I declare no conflict of interest for my presentation. So my patient was this 34-year-old lady, resident of Kot Radhakishan and married with 3 children, who presented to us with a presenting complaint of blurring of vision in both eyes for 8 weeks. Probing into the history revealed that the patient had a decrease of vision in the both eyes 8 weeks back, for which she consulted a local ophthalmologist, who advised intravitreal anti-VEGF injection ranibizumab after advising a few investigations. Patient's vision improved, but the blurriness remained, for which she presented to us on 21st of May. The decrease of vision was sudden in onset, painless, associated with metamorphopsia with no aggravating or relieving factors. Medical history revealed that the patient was recently diagnosed as a diabetic 5 months back. She had a history of flu-like symptoms almost 10 weeks back, which lasted for about 7 to 8 days with spontaneous resolution. My patient was a non-hypertensive, but she also had a history of headache off and on. Surgical history was unremarkable. Drug history was unremarkable. There was no history of any ocular or systemic disease within the family. My patient was a non-smoker, non-addict with a normal appetite and a sleep-wake cycle. So when we did the examination of the patient, the visual acuity as well as the best corrected visual acuity in the right as well as in the left eye was 6/6 partial. All the anterior segment findings was within normal limits. She had bilateral crystalline lens in both of her eyes. However, when we did the fundus examination of the patient, the cup to disc ratio of the left eye was 0.4, and there was this presence of creamy yellow-white placoid lesions that you can see here that was typically present at the posterior pole and the equator. Similar findings were seen in the right eye of the patient. So on the basis of history and clinical examination, we came to 3-4 differential diagnoses. One was acute posterior multifocal placoid pigment epitheliopathy, acute multifocal choroiditis, multiple evanescent white dot syndrome, or serpiginous choroidopathy. So in order to differentiate between them and make a diagnosis, we did some investigations which were ocular as well as systemic investigations. In the ocular investigations, OCT was done, which was completely normal when the patient presented to us. The fundus fluorescein angiogram was done, and here is the catch. You can see the presence of this hypofluorescent lesions that was present in the early phases of FFA that turned into a hyperfluorescent lesions in the late phases that did not increase in its size as well as in intensity. Similar findings were seen in the FFA of the left eye. All the systemic workup was done involving CBC, ESR serum, AS quantiferon TB, gold, chest X-ray, all of which was within normal limits. So on the basis of absence of vitritis and the FFA findings did not correlate with acute multifocal choroiditis and systemic investigations all being negative, acute multifocal choroiditis was ruled out. Multiple evanescent white dot syndrome was also ruled out because MUDs normally present as a unilateral disease, but my patient has a bilateral disease. And in MUDs, there is early as well as late hyperfluorescence, but in my patient, there was early hypofluorescence that converted into a late hyperfluorescence. So MUDs was also ruled out. Serpiginous choroidopathy was also ruled out, as we all know that in serpiginous choroidopathy, the lesions have a typical serpentine pattern, and in my patient, it did not have that pattern. So serpiginous choroidopathy was also ruled out. So on the basis of bilaterality of the disease in my patient, plecoid lesions typically present at the posterior pole, a history of viral prodromal symptom in my patient, and the FFA findings with early hypofluorescence and a late hyperfluorescence, a diagnosis of acute posterior multifocal plecoid pigment epitheliopathy was made. So now with this diagnosis of APM-PPE, the question that arises is, why was intravitreal anti-VEGF injection given in her eye? And the mystery was solved when we asked about the previous investigations of the patient. So this was an investigation that was done by the previous ophthalmologist, and as you can see that there is an increased macular thickness along with the dome-shaped elevated lesion that is involving in hyperreflectivity involving the outer layers of the retina, a very typical OCT of APM-PPE. So what happened was that the treating ophthalmologist treated this picture of OCT instead of looking into the patient's clinical fundus picture without making a diagnosis. However, after making a diagnosis, we did the management in which we look for the systemic associations. And the most common systemic association that presents in APM-PPE is cerebral vasculitis, for which we did the MRI of the patient, and that was normal. So in treatment, we counsel the patient about the self-limitation of the disease and a very good prognosis of the disease. Our literature review shows that APM-PPE is a self-resolving disease with a very good visual outcome, and there is no role of intravitreal anti-VEGF injection as a treatment modality of APM-PPE. So in conclusion, what I want to say is an increased thickness in OCT is not always an indication of anti-VEGF injection, especially when there had been multiple outbreaks of endophthalmitis in the recent past. And the take-home message from my presentation is we should go to the basics, that is history and complete clinical examination. Not all patients with increased macular thickness require anti-VEGF injection, and all the unnecessary interventional procedures should be avoided. So I started my presentation with a medical joke, and I would also like to conclude it with another medical joke that was told to me by my very respected Professor Dr. Zahid Chaudhry Saab, and he said that there is only one condition in which there is a role of intravitreal anti-VEGF injection as a treatment modality of APM-PPE. And you know what is that? Any guesses? No. So it is when the ophthalmologist's wife wants to go on a shopping. With this, I thank you all.
Thank you.
Any questions from the audience?
Yes? Okay, that's a very good question that is being asked by ma'am. She's asking that the most common neurological association that is associated with APM-PPE is cerebral vasculitis. So is there any other? So most of the patients, 90% of the systemic association is cerebral vasculitis. Other than that, there had been certain case reports in which you can see the presence of seizures along with meningoencephalitis, and intracerebral hemorrhages has also been reported in patients who have APM-PPE. Yes, definitely, sir. Sir, we once we diagnosed the patient as a case of APM-PPE, we referred the patient to the neurologist in order for to have an opinion for cerebral vasculitis. The neurologist advised the MRI, and the MRI turned out to be normal. So we did had a consultation with the neurologist. Sir, ESR was 11. Yes, sir. Sir, majorly the investigation that is done in is the MRI. In most of the cases of MRI, vasculitis is being ruled out. Other than that, had we had the ESR being raised above 18, so that was also a very major catch in order to detect the presence of cerebral vasculitis and an inflammation that is going on somewhere in the eye. Yes, sir, we are following the patient. Definitely, we are following the patient, and we are looking for the disease resolution and complete resolution of the plecoid lesions as well. Yes, sir. In the recent OCT, the thickness has been increased as the patient's vision has also been improved to 6/6 partial, as it is a very self-resolving disease with a very good prognosis.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Our next presenter is Awais Tahir Khan.
Hello and assalamu alaikum. My name is Dr. Awais Tahir. Hello and assalamu alaikum. My name is Dr. Awais Tahir and I'm a PGR FCPS ophthalmology resident at LRBD Township. So we have a case for you to present. So we have a patient who's a 21-year-old female. She's unmarried. She's a college student and a resident of Muri Gate, Lahore. She comes to us with two principal complaints. So one complaint is photophobia and the other complaint is decreased vision, which is in the right eye. So upon inquiry of these two symptoms, the photophobia is always acute in onset. It is consistent. It is more in the daytime as compared to the night. It increases in intensity in bright light. It worsens in sunlight, and it is associated with a watering and tearing of the eyes. The photophobia, which can be relieved by going into a dark room, by a change of light intensity, and by the complete avoidance of sunlight. The decreased vision, which was only in the right eye, is gradual in onset. It is painless, and it had been noticed by the patient for the past 1 year, and it had worsened during this time. We acquired there was no history of any ocular trauma. So we did a systemic review. So upon the systemic review, we can see there are multiple hypo and hypopigmented macular lesions were of various sizes were noted on the hands, the forearms, the face, the upper torso, and even the dorsum of the feet. These lesions had first appeared when she was of 4 years of age, and they had been consistent and associated with photosensitivity. On further inquiry, there was no history of any retardation of growth, intellectual impairment, hair or nail abnormality. The medical and the surgical history was insignificant. The drug history did indicate that the patient had used various prescription and over-the-counter medication, which consisted of topical creams, sunscreen ointments, steroid creams for her skin condition. And she also had to resort to using topical eye drops for whenever the photophobia had increased in intensity. This is the family history and the socioeconomic status. So the patient belongs to a low socioeconomic class, as her father is a rickshaw driver, and she has 3 siblings. One elder sister also exhibits the same condition and the same symptoms. Her parents have a consanguineous marriage, a cousin marriage, and her brothers, who are both younger in age to her, they do not show any of these symptoms. So this is the general physical examination, and as I told that there were multiple discrete hypo and hyperpigmented macular lesions of various sizes, and they were all over the face, the nose, the cheeks, the forearms, the hands, and the upper torso, and on the dorsum of the feet. So all the areas that are usually exposed, these lesions were present there. So this is the ocular examination which we did. So we did her best corrected visual acuity using a Snellen method, and we can see the left eye is 6/6, the right eye best corrected was 6/36, and with pinhole it improved to 6/12. These are the auto-ref findings. The color vision was done and using the Ishiharan City University, and it was normal bilaterally. No RAPD was found. The pupils were round, regular, reactive to light and accommodation. The IOP was measured using Goldman applanation tonometry, and it was in the normal range. So now we come to the slit lamp examination. The ones that I've highlighted are the ones where the significant findings are present. So no evidence of anything in the eyelids and eyelashes, but no evidence of any lid lesions. The sclera was also insignificant. Conjunctiva, both conjunctiva had bilateral conjunctival pigmentation and presence of conjunctival nevi. And there was mild conjunctival erythema, but there was no evidence of any trigium present in this patient. The cornea the right eye cornea had moderate corneal scarring, and there was about 5 clock hours of conjunctivalization of cornea with vascular infiltration, epithelial instability. And the interior chamber was of adequate depth, no cells, no flare. The iris was insignificant, lens was also clear, and the interior vitreous also was insignificant. So this is a picture of the cornea of the right eye, and as you can see, there is moderate corneal scarring, and there is also from about 2 o'clock to all the way to 7 o'clock, you can see this conjunctivalization. So when there is limbal stem cell deficiency in this area, there is epithelial instability, and the normal transparency of the cornea is gone due to vascular ingrowth from the conjunctiva. Now this is comparing the conjunctiva of the both eyes bilaterally, and the arrows that I've pointed are showing the conjunctival pigmentation, areas of conjunctival pigmentation. So we did a dilated fundus examination and it was normal. One thing we really wanted to find out was the evidence of any choroidal melanoma. So now based upon those findings and the history, we made a differential. And the top of the list was xeroderma pigmentosum. We also included Cockayne syndrome, trichothiodystrophy, cerebroaculofacial cell syndrome, and UV sensitive syndrome. So now I come to the topic of xeroderma pigmentosum. So this is a rare, it is an autosomal recessive condition, and it is due to a defect in the nucleotide excision repair. And the incidence is 1 in 1 million in the US and Europe, and in about 1 in 1 lakh in Asia and Eastern countries. And the reason for this increased incidence in this part of the region is due to increased consanguineous marriage between the population here. So this was first described by Moritz Kaposi. This is the same Austro-Hungarian physician after whom the Kaposi sarcoma is named after. And the symptoms appear after the children are exposed to sunlight, UV radiations, and they involve the dermatological, ocular, and neurological systems. And this was a term that was derogatory, and we do not use this term anymore. They were called children of the night or moon children, and films are made regarding this topic. So this is the picture slide just showing the inheritance pattern that is involving in xeroderma pigmentosum. So if both parents are carriers, then there is a 1/4 chance, 25% chance that the offspring will have the disease. This slide I made and I numbered it just to show you what the pathophysiology is in this disease. हम सब के अंदर normal sunlight के बाद thiamine dimers बनते हैं. There is damage, but we all have the appropriate and proper proteins in place for nucleotide excision repair. होता क्या है कि after the UV light, it induces the formation of these thiamine dimers, abnormal thiamine dimers. And then what happens is these thiamine dimers are to be excised or eliminated by excision endonuclease. And then the DNA polymerase will come, put in the respective nucleotides in place, and ligase will finally connect these fragments. I want you to focus on two enzymes here, excision endonuclease and DNA polymerase, because as I'll go into the classification, this will come into play. So this is the classification, the international classification of xeroderma pigmentosum that is available. And this classification shows that it is into 8 groups, 7 complementation groups and 1 variant group. The variant group is there just because the enzyme involved is DNA polymerase and not excision endonuclease. And most common is A, followed by C, and then V, these groups. So this I have just summed up the clinical manifestations of xeroderma pigmentosum in 3 major categories, and the ones that I've highlighted are the ones that are present in our patient. So hyperpigmentation on sun exposed and not on sun covered, sun protected skin. This patient did not have any neurological or ophthalmic abnormalities. That is why we ruled out cocaine and trichothiodystrophy dystrophy. Ocular has conjunctival erythema. There is pigmentation and melanosis. Now, one thing I want to state on this point is that the interior structures are more susceptible to damage in xeroderma pigmentosum. Choroidal melanoma obviously happens and is very lethal, but the interior structures protect the posterior structures retina from the UV exposure. So just finally to complete it, this is the treatment. So there is no specific cure for this disorder. There's just preventive and symptomatic measures. The preventive measures is use of sunscreen with a sun protection factor of more than 30, UV blocking clothing and sunglasses, and UV meters to assess. Systemic treatment is according to the treatment removal of pterygium, corneal transplantation with limbal stem cell grafting, and medical therapy is with interferon alpha and 5-fluorouracil. Prognosis is dire in those patients who have developed squamous cell carcinoma, basal cell carcinoma, squamous cell carcinoma, and malignant melanoma, and poor quality of vision in those patients with ocular manifestations. Thank you so much.
Involvement or complication of xeroderma pigmentosum. आई में क्या चीज सबसे पहले इन्वॉल्व ज्यादा कॉमन होती है?
सर कॉर्निया कंजक्टिवा सबसे पहले, लिड्स पे सर लीजन्स आती हैं.
कंजक्टिवा में क्या होता है?
सर मेलेनोसिस और उसकी नीवा बनते हैं.
Squamous cell carcinoma, very common. I have seen many patients.
Okay, sir.
There is a village in district Sheikhupura. The whole village is involved. Okay. हाँ. Number 1. Sir, एक minute. दूसरा ये है कि did you do any biopsy of conjunctiva to rule out any malignancy?
Yes, sir. So since our hospital is concerned, it's not a multi-specialty hospital liability, it's just with ophthalmology. So we referred this patient to the dermatologist. We had a dermatologist consult. We had a neurological consult.
Only, okay. So as you say, this is an autosomal recessive disease.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Runs in families.
Yes, sir.
Did you do any counseling of the family?
Yes, sir. We did rather vicious counseling of the family.
There are no further cases in the family.
Yes, sir. So we did rather vicious counseling of the family because upon further inquiry, the patient's father and his brothers all had married
हमने
into their
काउंसलिंग
cousins.
की थी कि नहीं?
जी सर, बिल्कुल सर, बहुत ज्यादा काउंसलिंग की थी और सर उनके दादी जिंदा थी तो
चलो,
उनको
ठीक
बुला
है।
के भी
Thank
हमने
you.
बड़ा अच्छा समझाया था।
एग्रीड।
जी जी।
यार उनको माइक दो ना, आपको क्या मसला है? जल्दी से माइक दिया करो, और ढीले आदमी हो।
It was a very interesting case. Regarding the slides, I want to suggest that always follow the 7:7 rule, and it says that there should be no more than 7 lines on the slide and no more than 7 words in one line. Your slides were very crowded. Otherwise, it was a good case. Thank you.
Noted, madam. Thank you.
Very important.
Thank you very much. Our next presentation is by Naila Hanif.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'm Dr. Naila Hanif from Gurki Trust Teaching Hospital. Today, I'm presenting my case. My patient was 30-year-old female resident of Gujranwala, came to the OPD with the presenting complaint of headache since 2 years and decreased vision in both eyes since 6 months. Patient was alright 2 years back when she developed severe headache. This headache was gradual in onset, global, started early in the morning and persists throughout the day, increased on coughing and bending forward. It was not responding to any medication. There was no associated history of nausea and vomiting. There was no history of flashes, scintillating scotomas, etc., and no history of nasal obstruction or sinus disease. There was decrease of vision in both eyes, which was gradual in onset, and it was not associated with redness, pain in eyes. She was wearing myopic glasses of minus 2.50 dioptric sphere in both eyes for the last 2 years irregularly. Previously, patient has a history of pregnancy-induced hypertension 8 years ago, which was controlled with medication. Hypertension and its medication, like calcium channel blockers, ACE inhibitors, and beta blockers, continued post-gestationally. Patient was diabetic for 5 months, being treated with oral hypoglycemic agents, and patient has the history of polycystic ovaries and amenorrhea after C-section. She is having hirsutism, progressive weight increase. Patient started having bone pain 5 years ago, and a diagnosis of hypovitaminosis D was made. Despite adequate replacement, no improvement occurred in her symptoms. Psychiatrically, patient was depressed most of the times with agitated behavior, inability to sleep, had no suicidal tendency. She was using selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Socioeconomically, she was a housewife and belongs to a well-off family. On her examination, gross examination, patient having a buffalo hump and hirsutism. General physical examination was normal, but her BP was 170 by 100 millimeter of mercury, and she was 91 kg. On ocular examination, visual acuity unaided was 612 in the right eye and 618 in the left eye. Her best corrected visual acuity with minus 3.50 dioptric sphere was 6 in both eyes. Pupil reactions were normal and extraocular movements were full. Patient's intraocular pressure was 16 millimeter of mercury in both eyes. On confrontation, visual fields were done and patient having bitemporal visual field loss. Slit lamp examination, interior segment was completely normal, and fundus examination, bilateral fundi were normal. These are the pictures of the fundus of patient having normal disc and macula. These are the visual fields done by Humphrey analyzer, shows the bitemporal hemianopia. The ocular OCT for retinal nerve fiber layer and macula, all the findings were consistent with the history and examination. On the basis of history, examination, and few investigation, my provisional diagnosis was space-occupying lesion at the level of optic chiasma. Patient was referred to the medical department for further evaluation. In the medicine, they noted easy bruising, skin thinning, and thin extremities. Pinkish stria were on the abdomen. They offered few investigations. Patient's 25-hydroxyvitamin D3 level was raised. Her morning and evening cortisol levels were also high. Her patient's hemoglobin A1C level was 7.9%, that was again high. Her cholesterol and LDL cholesterol level were also beyond the normal limits. Patient's serum adrenocorticotropic hormone was also high. Thyroid profile was normal. Renal and liver function tests were also normal. On ultrasonography of the abdomen, patient have moderately increased intra-abdominal and abdominal fat noted. There was no ascites and no enlargement of the para-aortic lymph nodes. This was the MRI brain of the patient showing different axial views of different sections, and this MRI brain shows a mixed signal in testes space occupying lesion measuring 2.5 into 2.3 into 1.6 centimeter is appreciated, and it is originating from the pituitary fossa, extends cranially to optic chiasma causing its compression, and features are consistent with the pituitary macroadenoma. We advise the biopsy for correlation. So on the basis of all these history, examination and investigation, my final diagnosis was adrenocorticotropic hormone producing pituitary macroadenoma. So we offered the management medically control of hypertension and diabetes, and surgically we can offer craniotomy for tumor removal or stereotactic radiosurgery, that is either gamma knife surgery or cyber knife surgery. Patient opted for gamma knife surgery and went to Karachi for the treatment of macroadenoma. This is the skull geometry which they offer before providing the gamma knife surgery, and these are the MRI markings of macroadenoma. Patient was followed up, came for follow-up in the medicine department and treated there for hypertension, diabetes and hirsutism. The post-treatment MRI report shows that the pituitary gland appears atrophic and no new lesions identified in the sellar and parasellar area. The post-treatment positron emission tomographic scan shows that the post-gamma knife low uptake seen in the pituitary, that is FDG avid abnormal hypermetabolic focus seen. This is the visual fields after the treatment showing approximately 90% of the resolution of the bitemporal hemianopia. This is the pre and post operative visual fields comparison. As you can see, there is not complete but approximately 90% resolution of the bitemporal hemianopia. Thank you so much.
Any question?
Yes, sir. The color vision was normal. I mentioned there.
Okay. What was the indication of OCT macula?
If there is a macular edema or
In this case,
In
only
this
optic
case-
nerve should be involved.
yes, so but
What about the optic nerve? Optic disc?
optic disc was normal. Both fundi were.
Very strange. Okay, thank you.
माइक दें जी.
Yes, the pupil were normal.
What is Wernicke's hemi-inopic pupil?
वो कह रही है कलर विजन pupil और ऑप्टिक डिफेंडस नॉर्मल थी, डिस्क नॉर्मल थी. आपके यहाँ नहीं होता ये गैमा नाइफ?
Sir, we are offering now this cyber knife surgery in Gurki Trustees. At that time, it was not available here.
चले, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
अब और कोई है कि नहीं?
Thank you so much. Next presentation is Dr. Mohalla.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Mohalla. I am third year resident from Sheikh Zayed Hospital, Lahore. I will be presenting a case in this presentation. We often talk about vitreoretina, but no one really talks about the structure that is behind the vision of the curtain. So today I am talking about choroid, that is the unsung hero behind the curtain of vision. So I'll start my case. We have a 30-year-old male. He was resident of Lahore. He presented to us on 21st June 2024 in outpatient department of Sheikh Zayed Hospital, Lahore, with following complaints. There was decrease of vision in right eye from last 5 days associated with distorted images from the same eye. Upon further inquiry, it was revealed that the 30-year-old male was having sudden onset of blurred vision in his right eye, which only started from 5 days. There was no prior history of any refractive error or any visual distortion at all. The blurring of vision was described as a haze that seems to fluctuate in intensity, but it was persistent every time. It was also associated with metamorphopsia. As I have described, he said he was having distorted images from the same eye. His past ocular history, medical, drug, all past histories and personal history was unremarkable. Upon general physical examination, he was a lean man, who was sitting upright in the chair, well oriented in time, place and person, and having normal parameters. There was no rashes or joint pains or any sort of tenderness at all. Upon anterior segment examination, visual acuity was 6/24 in right eye, which wasn't improving with pinhole. Near vision was, however, N12 without any near glasses. In left eye, he was 6/6 without any glasses and N5 without any glasses. Intraocular pressure was 12 in both eyes and extraocular muscles movements were full. This is the anterior segment examination. As you can see, it's all normal, unremarkable. However, posterior segment examination did show some results. His right eye optic disc was blurred. The nasal disc margin was slightly blurred and slightly elevated. There was macular edema, which was later revealed on OCT. However, there was raised macula on inspection. Peripheral fundus shows a circumcised reddish orange elevated lesion which was located on nasal side of the disc. It was almost 3 × 5 disc diameter in size. However, left eye fundus was completely normal. This is the fundus diagram of the patient of the right eye. As you can see, this is the orange-red elevated lesion, also slightly involving the disc. His color vision was, however, normal, and M-slit bridge showed metamorphopsia and relative scotoma, which was consistent with his macular edema. We asked the patient to draw what he was trying to tell us, and this is what he drew. This is the scotoma he was seeing. Fluorescent angiography showed hyperfluorescence in the early stage and with constant pooling in the later stages. His OCT revealed subretinal fluid and macular edema. This is the, we couldn't have his fluorescent angiography report, but we do have his OCT report. As you can see, the macula is raised in both these diagrams. There was macular edema, subretinal fluid. Okay, this is the macula of the left eye, which was completely normal. His D-scan ultrasound showed an acoustically solid dome-shaped mass in the choroid of the right eye. It was there was high internal reflectivity, and it was consistent with the choroidal hemangioma. One thing to note is high internal reflectivity. I'm putting so much emphasis on it because this is also a differentiating feature between choroidal hemangioma and choroidal melanoma. If there is high internal reflectivity, it moves more towards choroidal hemangioma as compared to melanoma. This is the B-scan of patient. As you can see, this is the dome-shaped mass visible in both of these diagrams. We involved a multidisciplinary team, also sent him to a neurologist and a radiologist for further investigations. This is the neurological exam. It revealed no results. It was unremarkable. MRI, however, was normal, as you can see in the bottom. His HRCT was also normal. Based on all that, we made these differential diagnoses: circumcised choroidal hemangioma, choroidal melanoma, osteoma, and granuloma. There's also, if he was older, we would have included choroidal metastasis also. Based on all the investigations and all the dealings, we found that we were more inclined towards the diagnosis of circumcised choroidal hemangioma of right eye. Okay, now on towards the management. Patient was given one injection of bevacizumab in right eye on 28/6/24. However, we lost, as we referred the patient, we are not currently performing these vitreoretinal procedures. So we referred the patient to a higher facility with these facilities available. We lost contact with the patient. Just 2 days back, he came back to us and he told us that there was 3 injections already applied to his right eye. But there wasn't very much data available, so we sent him for OCT and other investigations. However, we are not able to have those right now. Definitive treatment of this procedure is definitely PDT, photodynamic therapy. Also, there is monitoring and counseling, very important. Monitoring of visual acuity, color vision, visual fields, OCT, and fundus photography to track changes in the lesion size and subretinal fluid. Also, you should be focused on patient education, counseling, and follow-up. Prognosis is generally good, and appropriate monitoring and treatment is done to manage the symptoms and to prevent complications. Now, I'll talk about a little about circumcised choroidal hemangioma. What is choroidal hemangioma? It's basically malformations of vessels. It is also genetic. There could be malformations in any part of the body. The most parts that are involved are brain and eyes. It is also associated with Sturge-Weber syndrome. Apart from the contrast view that only diffuse hemangioma, choroidal hemangioma is associated with Sturge-Weber, but there has been reports that circumcised can also be associated with Sturge-Weber. That's why we send the patient for neurological examination. It is a benign vascular tumor. There are two types: diffuse, circumcised. Diffuse is associated with Sturge-Weber, and circumcised can show dome shape located posterior to the equator or some in macular area. Management, if there is no symptom, like in this patient, before there was no symptoms, he never went for screening even. So there is no treatment for if it is asymptomatic. You do not have to offer any symptoms at all, But if there are symptoms, then you can go for laser photocoagulation, photodynamic therapy, low dose radiation therapy, and anti-VEGF. I was able to get my hands on this very beautiful article on Springer. It showed how different modalities can work. These are some references, and thank you so much. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
First question is that you said you gave bevacizumab on 28th of June 2024.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you giving bevacizumab?
No, we sent him to another facility where he
Where?
received this. CMH hospital.
In CMH hospital
CMH
they
Lahore.
are
Yes.
लगा रहे हैं?
Yes.
वहाँ पर सर SOPs अप्लाई नहीं होते? CMH में कह रहे हैं कि लगा रहे हैं? Okay.
That's why मैंने नाम नहीं लिया. So, but he did
नहीं,
receive.
I'm surprised really लगाए जा रहे हैं मतलब चले ठीक हो गया. कहाँ पर?
कहाँ पे लगाते हैं?
कब से
LLBT में लगाना शुरू करते हैं.
1.5 month. This is June. मेरा ख्याल है तब तक तो SOPs भी नहीं जाए. बंद थे ना?
तब तक सिर्फ CMS लगा रहा था, इसके अलावा कोई भी नहीं लगा रहा था.
नहीं, वेस्टर्न लगा था या कोई और लगा?
Western.
Okay.
I do have the documents, but
Okay. Okay. We believe you.
Yeah.
अब आप पेशेंट
Now
के
the-
साथ जाएं और वहाँ खुद जाके लगाएं ताकि आप
नहीं, I do have the documents जिसके ऊपर लिखा हुआ है he received those injections. और अब तो उसको 3 लग चुके हैं.
आखिरी बंदा है.
अच्छा दूसरा क्वेश्चन जो है वो ये है कि आई वाज नॉट क्लियर व्हेन
Mishra
यू टॉक्ड
Rahman.
अबाउट FFA whether there was leakage or pooling.
There was early leakage. In the early phase,
Yeah.
there was leakage first.
So, ma'am.
And then it was sustained pooling in the
What is the
late
difference
phases.
between, what is the difference between leakage and pooling?
Ma'am, leakage शुरू में just dye leak हुई है and then वहीं पे pool होती रही है बाद में in the later stages. Because it's basically blood vessel, so एक दफा उसमें enter हुई है.
चलो, thank you,
then
बेटा. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So we conclude the session over here.